All right. Welcome into Conscious Conversations, conversations that are designed to elevate the consciousness of the planet. And today we've got Derek Newborn, the CEO of the Newborn Blueprint. Derek, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're excited to have you too. Nathan's online as well.
Hey,
We're
hey.
excited to dive
Sure.
into men's health, self-sabotage, some wellness, some mindset. We're gonna let it rip today. I can feel it.
Let's go.
So Derek, before we dive in too much, I'd love for you to just kind of ground us. If there's some kind of technique you'd like to walk us through, or something to just get us in the right space and place to show up big and for us all to play full out today, it'd be really cool.
Yeah. So I want everybody to just think about embracing the thought and the mindset of no matter where you are in life or what you're dealing with at this moment, every day that you wake up, you have a chance to make a choice, to make a change in your life. No matter what you went through or experienced yesterday, the moment you wake up, you're given that opportunity. You're given that chance to make a choice, to make a change in your life. And if you can embrace that mindset every day, you will slowly start to see life differently.
You said you've got a chance to make a choice to make a change every day.
That's right.
Derek, I'm getting the hint that you have developed that framework from some of your own struggles and your own journeys. Is that true?
Oh yeah. Uh yeah, I mean I think every struggle you can think of all the way down to suicide attempt to being in a mental hospital. Um, and the moment I embraced ownership of my responsibilities and my decisions, and that I have a choice to make a change every single day, I was able to pull myself from absolute rock bottom and start eliminating self sabotage, start eliminating a lot of my mental health battles, um, also start healing a lot of childhood um, traumas from that. So I'm super rooted in that, and I feel like it's just a powerful place to operate from each day because it even though we experience things that hurt us in some way, shape, or form, if we can take ownership of what we can control, it kind of take we're allowed to take the power back over our lives instead of constantly, blaming. They're valid, but we blame this thing or that experience for the reason why we are today. But if we take our power back and take ownership and realize we have the ability to make a change, we can start kind of reconstructing our life, no matter what, like I said, no matter what kind of damage we've occurred or created.
Yeah. Derek, maybe, for context for the audience, can you share a little bit about what your journey has been? I know you dropped in some really big words there, but I think for the
Yeah.
audience to really understand what your story has been, what you've actually been through, how
Mm-hmm.
that's informed who you are today,
Yeah.
I think would really help.
Yeah. So, about 10 years ago, I created a very successful fitness business. And from that successful fitness business, moved into the modeling space and became a very successful model. So on the outside, career wise, everything was going great. I even had a beautiful um, girlfriend, a long term relationship. So on the outside, everything was great, but the more success I had, also the more self sabotage I was creating, and at the time was unaware I was creating it from unhealed childhood trauma. But the more self sabotage I was doing, the worse and worse I felt about myself. The worse I felt about myself, the more self sabotage I was creating. And I couldn't figure out why I
Hmm.
was in that cycle. And you know,
What did that look like? What did that look like when you say you were creating a lot of, self-sabotage?
yeah. So a lot of cheating on my girlfriend, a lot of narcissistic tendencies in the sense of just taking what I could from friends and family and people closest to me with complete disregard for their emotions or their thoughts or
Mm-hmm.
actions. Um, and so obviously people can only take so much of that behavior before they have to remove themselves from your life. And everybody kind of started removing themselves. And I had already been struggling with depression even when before that stuff started. And then once everybody kind of bailed out on me, is when I hit rock bottom and the suicide attempt came. And then from the suicide attempt, I kind of had to take a hard audit. And it went from like, why did all these people do this to me? Why did they leave me? To realizing the common denominator in all my success and all my downfalls was me. And once I had that insight and had the courage to take ownership and say, okay, the reason behind this. So if I'm able to create all that destruction, I have that same power to create joy and happiness and actually develop into the man I'm designed to be. And then from there, I started reverse engineering through my life and was able to discover the unhealed abandonment trauma through childhood and realize, abandonment showed up a lot of ways through my childhood, through my teenage years and my early 20s. And so the self-sabotage behavior was me being so scared of being abandoned. So I would cheat on my girlfriend because I had this deep-rooted belief that she was going to leave me no matter what, because I'd been shown that through most of my life. So I always wanted to have somebody on the side so that I could never be abandoned. But people don't realize when you have unhealed trauma, whatever that trauma is, whatever that greatest fear is, you'll actually manifest it into reality. And that's what I did. Everybody eventually truly had to leave and abandon me because of my own self-sabotage. And that's what I help men uncover and heal now, so that they don't reach those points of suicide attempts or even mental hospitalization, isolation, all that stuff.
Wow. I just want to say I really appreciate that share, Derek, and I can still hear and feel that pain in your voice from that place that you were in, and it's really resonating with me as well, and reminded me of my late 20s when I did a similar thing and pretty much ran everyone out of my life, and at the time was feeling like a victim and feeling like, how is this happening to me, and 12, 13 years later, I can look back and be like, whoa, I actually created that for myself.
Exactly.
To grow. One, I think one, so we can sit with other people and help them through this, but two, for our own experience. Just to, a quick share, when you were saying, it was you as the common denominator. I remember going to my father in my late 20s and early 30s and being like, Dad, I'm meeting all these great women and I go on 2 or 3 dates with them and then they never call me again. And I'm going, I don't know why. And I remember my dad, he's a funny guy. He goes, it sounds like there's a common denominator here, Nick. And I'm like, well, what's that? He goes, it's you, man. And it was such a great moment of a wake up, like, oh, I'm the one creating this trauma and pain in my life. I was unaware of it why then, but I just want to say that it really resonates with me, and I appreciate you sharing that. Especially as an attractive, strong male in the fitness industry, like it's really refreshing to see that share. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that very much. Very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Derek. I know, especially for us men to embody and actually be vulnerable and share some of those aspects of our lives, where we were down. And even though you said, hey, on the outside, things were good.
Yeah.
But there was a deep-seated inner self-sabotage at a very deep level, like you talked about when you talked about your relationship. That's so profound.
Yeah.
And it's a journey that many men, kudos to you for even sharing it in public, but for many men, we don't even travel that journey privately.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's, and I don't have the answer to it, but I know, it's kind of a glaring issue in society because, again, if I look at my story at the height with the fitness business, with the modeling, if I would have went to, anybody and be like, man, I'm struggling with depression or whatever, 99% of the people would have responded, what do you have to be depressed about? You have A, B, or C. And that would have just piled on even more depression on me and made me feel like I'm doing even more wrong. You know what I mean? So it's very hard when you're in that position and you can feel inside that you're literally not you're not in alignment whatsoever, and you don't know where to go or where to turn to. And that's what I base my coaching program off of, to have that ability.
Derek, can you talk a little bit about that? Of maybe one, how do we start to identify these self-saboteurs, and then maybe second, as in what do we then do with that information?
Yeah. I mean, really, the biggest way to tell self-sabotage is really if your words and actions don't line up in private as they do in public. So like me, I wanted to be seen as like the greatest boyfriend and the nicest guy and the healthiest guy in public. And then the moment I was in my apartment with my girlfriend, just shut down and completely be ice cold and isolated. So, I mean, if you're out and about doing successful things, whatever your career is, and you're coming home and neglecting the people that are closest to you, then you know there's some self-sabotage, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest way to identify. Try to make it as simple as possible. And then once you are realizing you're doing some self-sabotage, if you think about, what is your greatest fear in life, that's probably attached to your self-sabotage. So whatever your greatest fear is probably rooted in some trauma that you experienced that you have not addressed, that you just, you experienced it, you buried it because you got to deal with life and you keep going. So, that's where a lot of our insecurities come from. And if we're not careful with that self-sabotage, we will absolutely manifest what we're trying to avoid.
What was that process like for you? And, I want to see if we can go a little bit deeper on when you actually were able to identify, like, oh, I assumed in the back of my mind that my girlfriend was going to leave me anyway, so I might as well go do X. I'm wondering if for the listeners, you can help identify, like, hey, what might be a process we go through to help see and identify where we might be doing that.
Yeah. So it almost 95% of the time it's going to be in our early childhood is our first experience of whatever that trauma was. So again, for me, I realized, okay, I had this fear of abandonment, and I knew that at 7, my dad sat me down and told me he was going to jail for 3 years. And I was like, well, what do you mean? That's, your father's not supposed to go away, right? So that was like the main, that was kind of like the biggest one. I was like, oh, of course. But the more start developing, I realized not from my father going to jail, that puts my mom in a single mother situation, which drastically changes her life, right? So as a single mother, and she's trying to navigate life, trying to date again, all that stuff, there were many times that she had a live-in boyfriend, and her and I would come home and he had moved all of our stuff out and completely left us with no microwave or TV or anything of that. So there's another form of abandonment, just like, dude, people will just up and leave you. And then I had my son when I was 16 years old in high school. And even though I was very much a part of his life, his mother tried to position me as not. Like, I even had pictures of him and I on my folder and stuff. But again, high school, and kids started to believe what she was saying. So nobody really wanted to hang out with a so-called deadbeat dad. So then I'm just being reinforced that, dude, it really doesn't matter if you're a great guy or not. People will abandon you. And then in my early 20s, I got married to a woman, not my child's mom, but another woman. But me and my son came home, and she had left, taking everything, TV, microwave, all that stuff. And then I realized that was like the mental break where I said, enough's enough. From here on out, I'm just going to look out for myself. That way I'm never going to feel this way or be abandoned again. And then I carried that mindset into every other aspect of my life. And the great thing is, if you can do that work, if you can reverse engineer, it doesn't excuse your behavior, but you're allowed to give yourself some grace. Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, this makes a little more sense. Now I can figure out what to do with it. Whereas a lot of us, we don't get to the point to understand like what we're even holding on to.
Right.
So if you start at the beginning and just start working through, and you'll be surprised what similar theme continues to show up in your life. So it's kind of like you're like unpacking your bag, and you can finally see what needs to stay and what needs to go.
Can we take that deeper? So what I'm hearing now is there was this trauma, this kind of unrecognized, unrealized trauma as a kid, and then you're going in your early 20s. Okay, no matter what I do, everyone's going to leave me. So fuck it. I might as well take care of number one. And then I'm assuming that's when the narcissism was then created, or when you kind of stepped into that space. I'd be interested if you could go into how you stepped into narcissism and then now I've learned how to step out of it. I think that's a really powerful story, especially especially for successful men. I think that is a very common thread, that we all, not all, but that we can deal with, and can be unaware of as well.
Yeah. So
I just want to say also, thank you so much for the deep shares you're doing and really being vulnerable about so many aspects of your life. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. So like I said, I carry that mindset, and it's really a perfect storm. So all those years of abandonment, and now I'm kind of like thrown into a lot of attention in the modeling world. Like all of a sudden, all these people are interested in me, right? So of course I'm gonna get what I can from you, whether that's having sex with you, whether that's just attention, whether that's to feed my ego, whether that's financial gain, whatever it may be. I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna have a disregard for you, and I'm gonna have a disregard for my girlfriend, and I'm gonna have a disregard for every single person. I don't have time for my family because I'm busy doing me. You guys already abandoned me, so it's all me. So, right, and the reality is, like, I was just misusing the gifts that I had, because once you have trauma, you're kind of like intrinsically motivated by something, and so each man will get to this successful point and kind of start to abuse the motivation they have. So again, if you look at it, if you look at anybody's self-sabotage, kind of like whatever their trauma is, the universe will deliver the opposite of that. So like mine was abandonment, so the universe delivered me a lot of attention. So so whatever that trauma is, the universe will deliver the opposite. And it delivers the opposite to try to make us understand the unhealed trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So all those years I spent using people, essentially, were designed to help me improve people. And so, and until you realize that, you'll keep being shown harder and harder lessons, which is why it took me to rock bottom before I could start shifting my life. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of the Enneagram, and I'm thinking of our drivers, and thinking of our trauma as, whatever is unconscious in us, that's what then actually manifests. It's like whatever we're afraid of is what we create. And it's very counterintuitive. I think a lot of times we think, and I think like, oh, if I just ignore this, and if I just like, I don't talk about it, it'll go away. It's like, it tends to be the opposite, and it gets louder and louder and louder until your life gets destroyed or gets fucked up. And it's like the universe is like, you listening now? Like,
yeah, exactly. Like I said, I was so concerned and so worried about being abandoned. I was trying to keep all these things around me, and by doing that, I essentially sacrificed myself and hurt the people that were closest to me, and put those people in a position where they had no choice but to, I wouldn't even call it abandon, but in my eyes, it was abandon me. And then the hurtful part, and what took me the longest to forgive myself for, was through me operating from unhealed trauma, I created trauma in other people. So we only pass it on. if we don't heal it. Pass it on to our family. We pass it on to the people that we love the most. When really we're not responsible for what's happened to us, but we're responsible for how we respond to it. And that's like, once you've unpacked your trauma and you start healing it, now you kind of have to start dealing with accepting responsibility for what you've actually created in other people because of your lack of knowing, and that can be a whole nother downward spiral, especially for men, because nobody's put on this earth as a narcissist or egotistical, right? They have to be created. People have to contribute to somebody becoming a narcissist. They don't just, they aren't fabricated out of thin air. Certain things have to happen. People have to fuel them to grow into a narcissist. And again, that's a whole nother avenue too, that people aren't really ready for.
Yeah. I mean, so, obviously probably one of the most misguided tool used by us humans is judgment,
Yeah.
And
very true.
One of the things that was a big light bulb for me in my life was like when I realized and came to the understanding that, oh, wow, everyone literally was born pure, but as a result of so many different life circumstances, and we don't know, the story of the person acting out in front of us or jumping the red light or yelling at someone or whatever, take your favorite antidote of when we judge someone.
Yeah.
That there are so many deep stories underneath that we just, and in your case, like you're describing one example of your own life, right? Decades of events that build up to us showing up in a certain way.
Yeah.
And of course, for us, no fault of humans as our own, just the way things are, we judge people, of course, by their actions and their words.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the greatest, so many great things have come from my journey and my healing, but the amount of compassion and I guess insight I have for other people, like just understand that there's no way to understand what any one person has gone through. Even if it's similar experiences, they still get perceived differently. So it also frees up a lot of expectations, right? Because a lot of us, we get hurt by expectations we put on other people, and we expect these people. Now, whatever the expectations are, that's a different story, but it's almost silly for us to expect somebody to operate the exact way we want them to when they come from literally a whole nother lifelong experience, reactions, trauma, etc. So I think it's like a higher elevated state of a human if you can get to that point and understand what you were just talking about, that there's so many journeys and so many things shape us that just sets us free, really.
It's interesting you bring in that piece around the expectations from a psychedelic ceremony about 4 or 5 months ago. That was one of the biggest things I pulled away from it. Was I have these two almost opposing personalities that show up. One is this non-judgmental, happy-go-lucky, free spirit, and then I have this other one that has a lot of unspoken expectations around the people that are closest to me. Not people on my peripheries, but the people closer to me. And the closer they get to me, the more expectations I have for them. And I realized coming out of this journey, I go, this is so unfair. I'm showing up in a way of being really light and easy and fun. And then with the people closest to me, I have all these unspoken expectations of how they should be interacting in the world. And I was like, well, one, who am I to decide how they should be acting? And two, how is it fair to them that they don't know my expectations of them because I haven't expressed them? And I was like, how can anyone deal with me is actually what I came through from this, right? And Derek, what I was thinking was when you were talking before, this thought of like, in the healing is the dealing. Like once you're aware of it, then now you got to deal with it in order to heal it. And I was kind of getting that hit as you were talking through the previous question, but you're right. Now there's the awareness. Okay, well now what do you do with it? Do you want to pack it in more? You want to step into it and say, hey, I'm not as perfect as I thought I was, and here's some. That's a whole process too of grace, as you said. But Yeah, like that. And the healing is the dealing of, okay, now what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still on a healing journey, but what a lot of people don't realize is because they like see my like where I'm at now, and I'm super vulnerable on my social media posts about my past and all that. But again, once I got to the point and realized I was the common denominator, it was all this unhealed abandonment trauma. There's also just such a heavy feeling that I had abandoned myself for so many years, abandoned the person closest to me. And so it took a little time for me to realize and truly embrace that, from this moment forward, with the awareness I have, it doesn't matter who comes and goes in my life, but I will never abandon myself again. So once you kind of connect with yourself, it's almost like you're a child again. So for like me, once I got to that point, I had so much social anxiety because like me and my girlfriend's breakup was very public on social media, and I lived in the same town my whole life, so it was very broadcast everywhere, all my downfalls. So I had this massive amount of social anxiety where I wouldn't even leave my house. I would just medicate with pills and alcohol and just try to sleep through as much of my life as I could. And it took baby steps. So just like learning to crawl again, like the first step was me just taking my dog for a walk downtown. And then the next step was me going out to eat in a public place. It just took so many small steps. And just like, when a baby learns to walk, it falls down and then it tries again. And sometimes I would go in a public place and there would be some kind of trigger that would set me in a downward spiral, and I'd go back to my couch for a few days. But you keep learning about yourself, because it's really like I'm meeting myself for the first time. Meeting Derek from the 7-year-old that was sitting in the living room when his dad left, like relearning about this guy. And so it's a very long journey. And even when I did get to the point, it's like, all right, I got myself. I know who I am. I know I don't have the self-sabotage anymore. And I think internally I was like, I'm this new man who I designed to be. Everybody like, come back, guys. And people don't owe you anything. So then you got to realize, all right, those people aren't coming back. And then that's another pivotal moment. So like, do I just go back to doing the things I was doing because those people aren't coming back? So, or do I stay true to myself and keep building this new identity? So the reality is, once you have that awareness, that's when the journey actually starts. That's a whole nother journey. It's almost like a rebirth. Like your life is starting over. And I think
Derek, I gotta ask: is the last name, is that your real last name, or have you taken on the last name of newborn?
No, that's my real last name.
I mean,
it's crazy. I know.
I don't know if you can get better than that based off what you're saying right now, man.
I know. Well, that's why it's called the Newborn Blueprint, because we mapping out new life. But yeah. So I think sometimes, people are a little motivated to get through the dirty stuff, but then there's some loneliness to it because it's just you. But that's really all you need to get going is yourself. It's been there the whole time. You just abandon them.
Yeah, I remember you talking, I was reading one of your blog posts where you were talking about this aspect of us as men getting comfortable spending time with ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? And so often we're like scrolling in social media or the next activity or, constantly staying busy.
Yeah.
But as we get comfortable spending time with ourselves, and you can actually ponder some of the questions like you're sharing right now, because you went from a place where it was, well, you had this, so many instances of abandonment, all the way to, hey, I'm going to be completely focused on myself at the cost of everyone else, right? Which created another dynamic.
Yeah.
And then recognizing, wow, okay, I'm not going to this is not creating the results I desire in my life.
Yeah.
it's hurting me in a whole different way. Even though I thought I was focused on myself, it's actually hurting me in a whole different way. And now the people I care most about are leaving me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you come to this, oh my God, I went from this side of the story all the way to the other side, and I'm still nowhere to be found. It's like, okay, holy shit, I got to start over and sit with myself.
Mm-hmm.
Who the hell is Derek? And what does Derek stand for? Who is this person going to be in the world?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to live these two extremes versions of my life anymore, right? Oh my God. Like what a journey.
Yeah. I mean, literally, I just started doing the opposite of what I would have done in the past. So if I was feeling a little depressed in the past, I would take some pills and drink something and pass out. So I better go get in my truck and go for a drive. Or I'm feeling a little lonely. Let me find somebody on social media and send them a message. That's what I used to do. So now I'll go take my dog somewhere or go work out. I just started doing the opposite, right? Because I know what those past decisions, I know where that leads me, right? So I know those are no longer options. So if those choices take me there and I'm trying to go here, let me just start making the opposite. And you start building momentum, and you start building confidence in yourself, and you start discovering, oh, I do enjoy these things. And it's crazy because I've do a lot of things alone, but the things I'm doing now are the same things that I enjoyed during my childhood, which are doing things outdoors, traveling, playing with my dog, being around animals, enjoying music and all that stuff. So again, all I'm doing is I just went back to 7-year-old Derek, picked him up and said, all right, let's go. Let's continue on this journey. So it just comes full circle. So if you can go to that point of trauma in your childhood, and between that point of trauma to from the day you're born, there's a time in your life where all you did was just do things you enjoy. You had no concept of hurt, sadness, or anything. And if you can remember, what'd you do? Did you go play outside? You wrestle, do whatever? It'll start pointing you into the direction where you still need to go. And that's what I started doing. And then you get to the point, there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And you only learn that through repetitions of spending time with yourself.
Nice. Derek, it sounds like you're starting to bring in this aspect of an inner child.
Sure.
Can you talk about that? And especially for the men listening of, one, what is that? And two, how do we get in touch with that? How do we get in touch with that inner child that wants to come out, is what I'm hearing from you talking.
Yeah. So like I said, there's for every single person on earth, there's a moment in time. We're put on this earth with a specific set of gifts, talents, atmosphere that are designed to improve the world. And that's the only thing we operate from until our first point of trauma. And usually that first point is between like 7 and 12. But that short time in our life, like I said, we just operate based off what we like, based off how we feel. We just exist. And if you can allow yourself,
it's like this back, it's like this core essence that you're pointing to,
your most authentic, powerful version that you operate from. And if you can sit with yourself and through meditation or whatever, and just let memories come back of what you did as a child, you can kind of start to see, okay, these are things I enjoyed, that's why I did them. Those things live inside of us, and then we experience trauma. So whatever the trauma was, so if you're designed to help people, usually the trauma again will be the opposite of what our gifts are, and we experience that trauma. And since we're at a young age, it makes an impression on us. So we slowly start acting different, right? And it's as we start acting different, we start experiencing the world different. And now we're operating from this belief of trauma. So it continues to show up, and we keep putting on these masks. We keep putting all this stuff in our luggage that we carry through life. And we get to the point where we're so far out of alignment that we're either miserable in some way, shape, or form, whether it's relationship, self, whatever. And then we get to the point like, God, life is really hard or I'm feeling really bad. It's just because essentially we left ourselves at that point of trauma, and we've put on all these masks as we go through life. Put on this mask so this person sees me as valuable, and we put all this weight on other people's thoughts, opinions, and all that stuff. That eventually something has to give. It's either we cross a threshold where there's no turning back, or we get to that threshold of we have a decision to make, either go back to that childhood or continue on the way we're doing. And again, the universe will keep bringing us lessons and teachers to try to be like, hey, you left yourself way back there. You need to go back there and get them. And if we don't, we're in for trouble. But yeah, so the inner child is the most powerful thing. I've reconnected through meditation, through NLP, through my own life coach. So there's different ways to do it, but again, it's true for all of us. Is the inner child and the child that's left behind.
Interesting you say actually, that we've sorry, Nick, let me just finish one thing, and then it's interesting you say we've left this aspect of ourself behind, and I'm just getting this hit of a 40-year-old man having a midlife crisis and blowing up their entire life. And people going, how did that happen? He looked so happy. He had the good job and the family and the kids. And it's like, because he didn't listen to himself for the past 30 years. And then one day it's an implosion is really what it is. It looks like an explosion, but it's actually an implosion. And I guess I've never thought of the reason why men do that until right now in such a clear way. So thanks for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard for a man to be like, oh, my inner child. They're automatically like, too tough. All right, that's not for me. I'm
meant to be strong and never ask for help. I can do anything and everything on my own. So inner child. You mean the weakling?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's the first impression,
Yeah, but really, that inner child has all the guidance. If you can connect with that inner child, like I'll have my clients, once we get to a certain point, through meditation, they'll go sit in a room with that child and they'll ask that child specific questions, and the child will have the exact answers that they need to hear. And the reality is those answers are already inside them as grown men. They just don't know where to go find them. But when they're in a room with their inner child, the inner child will say everything that has been true to their heart for 20, 30 years. And now we're just able to bring it out. And it's become super transformative because I'm not telling them what to look for. I'm not telling them what's right or wrong answers. They're able to pull it out. And the only way they can pull it out is if it's already inside them. So it becomes like very mind blowing. They're like, holy shit, this has been in here this whole time.
It's crazy that we're actually talking about this, because just this morning, I was re-listening to one of the trainings that I lead. So every time I'm meeting with my clients, I'm sort of refreshing it in my head. And one of the techniques that it's actually a training around self-sabotage. So identifying your saboteurs, really breaking them down, shifting them. And one of the techniques to connect with this essence of your inner child is actually looking at a photograph of yourself younger than 12 years old.
Yeah.
When you can see, picking a picture that sort of reflects that essence, the true essence of you, and being with that picture, even just staring at it and looking at the version of you back then as a child and who you were. And it, of course, another way to trigger those memories and really see like, okay, who was this person? What did they like doing? What brought them joy? What drove their curiosity? What drove their courage, or what were they afraid of? All of those things. So I just wanted to add that in there, is like looking at that picture of your younger self can be quite powerful.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so passionate about men's mental health, because it's true for everybody. It doesn't matter how rich you are. It doesn't matter how tough you are. It's there for everybody if they choose to, and if they choose to do the work. Like so many people, like we've talked about, on the outside, they're just crushing it, but on the inside, they're so hollow and empty, and they know that they're not living like they were designed to be. And there's a child back there just waiting to reconnect and It has all the answers that you need. It's crazy.
I think all three of us know how hard it is to get men to open up. So the fact that the three of us are having this conversation here at this time, it's actually quite an exception.
Yeah.
Derek, I'm curious to hear, in your experience, what have you found most helpful? Do men have to severely break down in their life in order to get to that place? Do we have to have that deep suffering, or have you found a different way to help connect and open up these conversations?
Man, I haven't. The goal is to obviously keep anybody from that deep level of suffering, and again, that's why I'm so transparent about my story. Like, without my story, I wouldn't be on this podcast interview. I wouldn't be working with the people that I do. But it's why I'm so transparent about my whole journey to inside out, because I still see messages in my DMs from guys that they've sent it, and I've seen the first few lines of it, and before I can go back and like respond to it, they've deleted it. So I know there's a lot of men struggling. So I don't know if there's a concrete answer on how to get men to that point, other than I just have to keep living the message so that maybe a person will see, all right, if this guy has been through this, I know I can do something. They don't even have to reach out to me, but at least it shows that there are some opportunities, because I've done everything. I've had spiritual mentors. I've had actual pastors of church mentor me. I've done psychedelics. I've gone on couples retreats solo. I've done so many things, and the only way to figure out what's beneficial and what not is to try them. There's plenty of things that I tried. I was like, oh, that didn't really do anything. But now I know, okay, this isn't beneficial, right? So if you just keep leaning in, you're going to find where the next step is. There's always a step forward. So again, that's why I just try to keep preaching the message. I don't have a direct answer for it.
Yeah, and it's a complicated one, I don't think there are any necessarily easy silver bullets, but I think one for sure, like you're saying, is folks like ourselves putting our own journey and our own vulnerability out there as examples of, hey, it is okay as us men to recognize that we've had some tough situations in our life.
Yeah.
And that sharing them or talking to someone you feel comfortable enough with is a perfectly good way of taking the first step. And seeking help is another step. And that seeking help is okay. We're not necessarily meant to solve all of this on our own. We don't have to put that burden on our shoulders.
Yeah. I just try to think of like, what did I need the most when I was in my darkest points? I needed to see that somebody else had gone through it and made it to the other side. I needed to know that there are places that I could reach out to who would be there to work on solutions instead of chastising or asking me, what do I got to be depressed for? Just, what are you dealing with? Okay, if that's what you're dealing with, let's figure out how to create a solution around it. Less time.
Yeah.
Like I tell my clients, I'm interested in hearing their problems once, and then from then on, we're just focused on solutions.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I think we should name, I think there's a narrative, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, that men don't get the same grace as women when it comes to trauma. And I'm generalizing, but to me that feels true, that it's like, well, you should be able to handle this, or it's like your trauma doesn't count as much as the women in the room. And I think to me that feels like some of the narrative which keeps men stuck. And then as a result, we don't have male mentors. We don't have positive male role models in our lives who are showing us different ways of being that are embodied in a masculine sense, but in a positive masculine quality of presence and non-judgment and protection and safety, and the ability to come into a room and say, hey, whatever you got, bring it in. Like, I mean, that's the positive quality of a positive male masculine role model. It's like we will sit. We'll sit with it. And I think a lot of times, Derek, sounds like you and I, we were raised by women as our as our role models. And I think my mom, to a large extent, was my masculine role model. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think a lot of us have gone through that. And I think the way we do start is these conversations and showing men and women that you can be confident and strong and masculine and embodied and loving and open and vulnerable, and that those all can live together. There's some kind of narrative that those have to be separate. And they do not by any means. So to me, that's where it starts with us and living in the world the best we can and showing, hey, there's another way to do it. And then some guys will be like, I'm interested. What do you got? And some ladies too. They're like, what do you got? Then they start circling the wagons, right? And then.
Yeah, I was just going to say, literally, the last few days and even this morning, like I'm personally trying to find like a men's community that I can lean into, because obviously, like I hold a lot of space with my clients and stuff, and sometimes I'm not mentally prepared or equipped enough to engage with like a female interest, because I just don't have that capacity. And then I'm not, if she perceives it the wrong way, she'd be like, well, you're not, you're dysfunctional or whatever, and so like I'm just, even me and at my current situation, I'm still looking for like just a community where I can like lean in, hear other men's struggles and like share struggles instead of like, client relations, but like a community of men. So that's definitely lacking for men, in which in turn, people just, we bury it. And then in turn, it's being perceived as you should be able to handle these things.
Well, maybe Nathan and I ran a men's group called the Mindful Man for a year. We co-ran it, and maybe we need to bring it back. And if anyone's listening, if you're interested, let us know. But it was getting together in a space to hold each other accountable and listen, and be vulnerable. And I, for me, it's some of the most powerful, impactful work I've ever done in my career and in my life. And holding space for men grew me tremendously as a man. We did a technique talking about being vulnerable when we had each guy stand up in front of the camera with their shirts off and stand in front of the camera for, what was it, Nathan, 2 to 5 minutes at a time. And then each man went around and told the man what they loved about him.
Oh yeah.
And it was this sense of vulnerability and then letting it land, letting the compliment, letting it land. And that was powerful work, really powerful work.
Where that'd be super
and that was, of course, after many, many weeks of doing vulnerable work, so that we knew each other. Yeah. And we could see our pure essence coming through.
Yeah.
And helping dissolve some of the stories that we all build around each other. So I remember, when I was witnessed, or when Nick was witnessed, and other men were sharing things that they saw, and he was like, holy cow, like, okay, yeah, I don't have to put myself down all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great feeling when guys have that breakthrough, they connect. You can almost like see their body let go of the weight. You can you can see the tension let go of their face. Their posture changes a little bit, and it's almost like they're able to catch a full breath finally for like probably the first time in years.
Yeah, taking the armor off.
Yeah, exactly.
Being with the moment, I feel like there is something that's bubbling up, and I've actually seen this done effectively on other podcasts, where you take a break. You take a break and you let everything that's been said settle.
I feel like we've thrown a lot out there to the audience in a short amount of time.
Yeah. Derek, where do men go from here? They've listened to this podcast. They've heard us talk about vulnerability. They've heard us talk about the inner child, saboteur. That's a lot. Where do they go from here? Let's say the person that's hearing this and that says, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah, they're ready. I mean, the top layer answer is to shoot me a message, and we'll have a conversation, just a conversation. That's a start. But in a general sense, if you're ready, take a step towards getting help. So like I was mentioning earlier, I've done every form. I've done therapy. I've done spiritual counseling. I've gone on retreats by myself. I've done psychedelics. I've done it all in search of healing. Now, not every single thing created healing, but it was still a step forward because it gave me awareness on what I don't need, what's not working for me, which only pointed me more in the direction of what I do need. So even if that's just booking an appointment with a therapist, just book one appointment. Worst case scenario, you don't like it, and then you're back to the same point. But you have a little more awareness because you know at least that therapist is not a fit for you. Whereas before you had no concept. So it's just about taking small steps, because no matter what, it's not going to happen overnight. So if you're ready, you just take the first step to reach out for help, and whatever that looks like whether it's your best friend, whether it's your spouse, you know, take the first step, reaching out for help, because it's very easy to like know that we need help. It's very easy to read self-help books. It's very easy to scroll through motivational quotes on Instagram, but what are you going to actually do with it, right? And what you're going to actually do with it to make progress is take the first step. So again, whatever that looks like for that person is hard to say, but there's no wrong direction you can go from taking action, right? So taking action would be the next step. There's no wrong step of action if you're at that point.
And it's a great question. I'm actually kind of wondering, maybe Nick, you and I can share also just sort of what's helped us in our own journeys, right? To just build off of that. Because sometimes, yeah, you know, we have an understanding friend and we can speak to someone. Sometimes there's someone in the family and we can do that. Oftentimes we actually have to set context to say, hey, you know, I'm in a deep place and I want to share something and I just need some listening ears, you know. I need us to suspend judgment and I need us to suspend solutions. I just need to be heard. And then maybe I might be ready for some solutions, right? But like setting some boundaries around that can help. The other thing that I remember, I'm just thinking back to my early years when I was processing a lot of things in my own childhood. You know, often one of the best things I think I did for myself was just having this habit of going for solo walks. And something with movement and having the space to think. You know, maybe it's 15 minutes, maybe it's 30 minutes, and maybe sometimes it's a run. You know, to give you more oxygen. Letting those emotions really process through exercise. I found similar benefits when going hiking. Sometimes like, okay, we're working through some tough stuff, going on a really hard hike, but you know, doing it maybe solo or with only one good other buddy so that you really have space. All of those have been very healing.
I always tell my clients, and I do it myself, because like I have a very strict morning routine, and not because I'm like super disciplined or anything. It's just because I know when I wake up, like the depression is there if I allow it to. So I have a specific routine to kind of set the intention for the day. But, you know, if I am feeling a certain type of way, I'll literally just set my timer on my clock for 15 minutes and I will just exercise for 15 minutes. Whatever, any kind of movements, just movement for 15 minutes, because I know chemically, no matter what, our body's going to release specific endorphin and dopamine. And worst case, that'll give me a 10% chance to change my thoughts and make me feel better. Worst case, I'm still in the same position and I'll call it a day on the couch or whatever. But at least give yourself that chance to create chemical changes in your body. Because what I usually find is it creates enough chemical change where I'm like, maybe I'll go out to eat and get some lunch, or maybe I'll go enjoy the day. And it's just that small 15-minute window drastically changed my day and my behavior, which who knows how much it impacts our future. So I always say, like, worst case scenario, 15 minutes of movement, and then assess how you feel. If you feel the same, cool, you gave yourself a shot. You're not going to win them all, but more times than not, you're going to start thinking just a little different about yourself based off the chemicals that have been released in your body.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. You know, embracing the power of movement and changing your physiology. And just to piggyback on you guys, it's a lot of the same thing. It starts with what you've been talking about, Derek, of awareness first. So for me, it's if I'm feeling off or I'm feeling frustrated or angry or stuck, those are the ones that show up for me. It's one, bringing awareness to that. Okay, how do I feel? Okay, I feel upset. Okay, and then the next thing I'll do is, almost as a self-therapist, is then ask myself, okay, like, what am I feeling? And then the next question is why?
Yeah.
And I don't always have the answer to that, which is interesting. Even as someone who's done a lot of self-work, it's like, why am I frustrated? It's like, I don't know. Okay, well, the answer is in my question. If I can ask the question, then there's a good chance I can find the answer. And then for me is once I have some clarity, an answer, then it's action, right? It's almost exactly what you said, Derek. So there's awareness, there's an understanding of what's happening, there's a choice, and then there's action. And then what I would throw on the back end of that, and Derek's referring to this too, is they're not judging your actions.
Mm-hmm.
Because then that's when we get stuck and we get paralysis by analysis. It's like, oh, I'm feeling frustrated. I need to change my state. I'm going to go for a run and then do it.
Right. Yeah.
And you will find more often than not, that's the key. More often than not, you will find you will feel better. You'll have more clarity and you'll be able to move forward. Yeah. And in that sense, it's very simple. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's a very simple framework, very basic framework.
Yeah. And like one of the most powerful things, like, I don't know how crazy this sounds, but like my suicide attempt, I don't even consider the lowest. So like the lowest was in the actual mental hospital, which actually came after the suicide attempt, like a few months later. But in the mental hospital, you don't get to decide when or what you eat. You don't get to decide if you're going to watch TV or what you're going to watch. You don't get to decide anything. You're not even given a pen to write notes. You're given crayons, coloring books, and puzzles. You don't get to decide when you go outside. You don't get to decide anything. So the moment I experienced that, I was like, holy crap. Like, it doesn't matter what kind of day I'm dealing with. If I'm outside this hospital, I can go outside. I can go eat whatever I want. I can listen to whatever I want. I have all these opportunities to make myself try to feel better. And we don't realize, right? Because when we're depressed or when we're dealing with things, that's all we kind of see for whatever reason. That's what we're saturated in. And again, until you actually have those things taken away, you don't realize how many opportunities there are in this world. Again, I understand they're hard to see. I've been there, but just the ability to go outside, you would be, or guys would be amazed how much you can actually feel difference when you haven't had that opportunity, when you've been indoors, indoor lighting for 7 days at a time, by stepping outside, how your body responds. And it's such a positive way of having just natural light on you and all those things. So there's so many ways that we can create just such small, subtle shifts in our life that can really, like, we just use them as building blocks and you just build from them. And that's like one of the hardest experiences, but one of the most powerful experiences I've ever, because there's nothing now that would ever put me in that situation to jeopardize my freedoms again, no matter what.
And a moment like that, there's just such an enormous amount of pressure first, of course, that you feel, because you're like, oh, holy cow, what am I stuck in? I haven't been through that personally, but I'm picturing. But then it also feels like it demands or requires ultimately like a form of self-surrender to the situation.
It's funny you say that, because like I had one phone call to make before I went in, and I called my life coach, and I was ready for like a pep talk, and he was going to like coach me through it. And he was like, brother, you're going on vacation. It's time to let go of all the everything. You have no choice. I was like, what do you mean? Like, give me some motivation. He's like, no, just let go. Just let go. And he was so true. It's exactly what I did there. That's it. But yeah, it's self-surrender.
It's a powerful word. It's a tool when you need it. It is.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this has been a great conversation, and Derek, again, I really appreciate, and I know Nathan does too, your ability to go deep and share and be so vulnerable and so open and honest, and for us to be examples of how men can do all these things and be successful and masculine and present, and let's show more of this. Let's lean into this more. Anything you'd like to leave our listeners with? Anything you'd like to leave us with before we sign off?
Just I really appreciate you allowing me on the platform and us having this. I feel like it was such a powerful conversation between all three of us. So I appreciate you guys creating that. And like I said, each day we wake up with a chance to make a choice to make a change. So just hold on to that. Hold on to that mindset till tomorrow morning. Start making choices to make a change in your life. You're more than capable of it.
Absolutely.
Take
Absolutely.
a
Well,
deep
Derek,
breath
thank you
with
so
that
much.
one.
Yeah, man. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. That was great.
Absolutely. All right. If you're listening, if this episode impacted you, if you feel like it's going to help change the life of someone else you know, please share it, give it a like, and make sure to send this conversation out to someone else who can help change their life as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next time.